conversation. There's a few things I think perhaps we'd be well advised to cover first, some other soft skills. So I've talked about questioning, I've talked about answering. What I'd like to do next is talk to you about listening. Now, you may think, well, of course I listen to people, I pay attention, and I respect what the other people are saying. And that may well be the case, but the challenge comes is in the minds of the other person. They may be quite insecure. They may be saying something to you, but they're not confident that you are listening to them. Maybe it's the sort of person that needs to be encouraged to speak some more. Or maybe it's an aggressive person and they're trying to dominate you. And so you have to decide how you're going to listen to them and whether you want to listen to them at all in the first place. Because by managing skillfully the way you listen to someone, you can actually control that interpersonal dynamic. So let's talk about a subject called active listening. Now, I haven't actually researched this on YouTube, but I'm sure there's going to be just a load of stuff on it. But there's a few basic concepts within active listening. The first is you can listen actively using the position of your body, so by leaning forward to someone like that. Perhaps not quite like that, but by leaning forward, you're showing that you're listening. And if you watch two people on television, for example, with the sound off, and look at the body positioning of the speaker and the listener, you can see that that is one form of intercommunication between those two people. In active listening is gesture. So you, as well as the position of your body, you can show with your hands to some extent whether you're listening or whether you're not listening. For example, if you're fidgeting with your hands, or as an extreme example, if you're tapping on the table, that's going to send a signal to the other person that you're waiting for them to stop talking because you've got something you want to say, or what they're saying is just plain boring. So that's position and gesture. Now, the final area, which is the most important, is the area of sound. And sound breaks into two things. There's verbal listening, would you believe, and non-verbal listening. Let me start with an easy one, an example of non-verbal listening, which is where you use a sound, but you don't actually use a word. So you will hear this all the time. Someone says something to you, and you say, uh-huh, or wow, or And through those different sounds, you can convey to the other person your thoughts on what they've just said. For example, might be expressing doubt. Wow might be expressing surprise. Might be projecting agreement. Non-verbal communication is a form of active listening, which is a low-profile, non-interrupt type of listening. The other person gets a signal back from you that you are listening, so it is active listening, but you're controlling the nature of telling them how you're listening without actually interrupting them with words. Now, the next aspect of active listening, which moves slightly towards controlling the conversation, is using words themselves. For example, I see, or that's interesting, or really, or wow, I didn't know that. And finally, the most powerful form of active listening is really, tell me more. That's pretty obvious, really, isn't it? And I wouldn't suggest you necessarily say, tell me more. Another aspect of that is, in active listening, is called building. So someone says, I went to Greece on holiday last year. Into Greece, where did you go? So you've heard them saying they've gone to Greece, and you've expressed interest in what they've said, and then you're building on the fact that we're talking now about Greece, and you ask them where they went. And they say, I went to Mykonos. It's just a Greek island. Oh, Mykonos. I haven't been there. Can you tell me about it? Did you like it? And so you're taking the conversation forward, and in that case, you're taking it forward in a positive way. Now, the people who study this stuff, there are actually, there's many ways, depending on how you want to categorize it, but there's a profile I use, which has got 11 different types of active listening response. I don't know whether we'll put that up as a slide at some point or other. But it breaks into categories like seeking information or reflecting or rewarding and various other techniques like that. I don't want to go into them at the moment. I think what I want to do is just introduce you to the concept of active listening. So next time you're in a conversation with someone, what I really think you should try doing, if indeed you want to build up your soft skills, because active listening is very much a soft skill. If you want to build up those soft skills, you have to practice and you have to think about how you're going to respond. Do you want this conversation to go on? Because if you actively listen in an encouraging way, the conversation probably will go on. Do you want the conversation to stop? In which case there are ways of, no, you can say, verbally you could say, I don't think so, or no way, or that'll discourage someone. And quite possibly, if you're lucky, they'll shut up. And then if you very quickly follow through with your own thoughts and control the conversation with a question, which is the most powerful tool in conversation, is to shove a question at someone of the nature that you want to ask, then you're beginning to go down the conversational control path. But it is based, to some extent, on active listening, because the right response has to be based on what's in the mind of the other person as they speak to you. And you'll only be able to understand what's in the mind of the other person if you listen. And then the control piece comes from active listening, upon which you then make a decision. So I think that's an okay introduction to listening, and I'm going to move on to another topic. But I hope you understand that active listening is a skill, and before we do go into the whole area of conversation, I hope you'll appreciate that questioning, answering, and active listening are important. And there's 2 or 3 others, actually, that I'd like to cover before we actually really go into conversation. So bear with me. Keep watching the dialogues. You'll see how I use active listening in those dialogues. And maybe slowly you can see Corbyn adopting some of these techniques himself. And the nature of our little interchanges becomes more dynamic and more fruitful. It shifts from what you might call the teacher-pupil, and it's moving towards what's called adult-adult. Now, that's another topic that I'll be introducing later, which is based on transactional analysis. So that's me seeding the topic of transactional analysis, which we'll come on to later. But let's not do too much too soon. Let's finish this one, and then we'll go from there. Thanks a lot. Bye.